Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm reading James and the Giant Peach by Roald Dahl. All Roald Dahl's own work. I'm just reading it for entertainment and pleasure. Let's get going. Chapter 16. And now the peach had broken out of the garden and was over the edge of the hill, rolling and bouncing down the steep slope at a terrific pace. Faster and faster and faster it went, and the crowds of people who were climbing up the hill suddenly caught sight of this terrible monster plunging down upon them, and they screamed and scattered to the right and left as it went hurtling by. At the bottom of the hill it charged across the road, knocking over a telegraph pole and flattening two paths that went by. Then it rushed madly across about 20 fields, breaking down all the fences and hedges in its path. It went right through the middle of a herd of fine Jersey cows, and then through a flock of sheep, and then through a paddock full of horses, and then through a yard full of pigs, and soon the whole countryside was a seething mass of panic-stricken animals, stampeding in all directions. The peach was still going at a tremendous speed, with no sign of slowing down, and about a mile farther on it came to a village. Down the main street of a village it rolled, with people leaping frantically out of its path right and left, and at the end of the street it went crashing right through a wall of an enormous building and out the other side, leaving two gaping round holes in the brickwork. This building had happened to be a famous factory where they made chocolate, and almost at once a great river of warm melted chocolate came pouring out of the holes in the factory wall. A minute later this brown sticky mess was flowing through every street in the village, oozing under the doors of houses and into people's shops and gardens. Children were wading up in it up to their knees, and some were even trying to swim in it, and all of them were sucking it into their mouths in great greedy gulps and shrieking with joy. But the peach rushed on across the countryside, on and on and on and on, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Cowsheds, stables, pigsties, barns, bungalows, hayricks, and anything that got in its way went toppling over like a ninepin. An old-fashioned man sitting quietly beside a stream had his fishing rod whisked out of his hand as it went dashing by, and a woman called Daisy Entwhistle was standing so close to it as it passed that she had a skin taken off at the tip of her long nose. Would it ever stop? Why should it? A round object will always keep on rolling as long as it is all on a downhill slope, and in this case the land sloped downhill all the way until it reached the ocean. The same ocean that James had begged his aunt to be allowed to visit the day before. Well, perhaps he was going to visit it now. The peach was rushing closer and closer to it every second, and closer also to the towering white cliffs that came first. These cliffs are the most famous in the whole of England, and they are hundreds of feet high. Below them is a deep and cold and hungry. Below them, the sea is deep, cold, and hungry. Sorry, guys. Many ships have been swallowed up and lost forever on this part of the coast, and all the men who were in them as well. The peach was now only 100 yards away from the cliff, now 50, now 20, now 10, now 5, and when it reached the edge of the cliff, it seemed to leap up into the sky and hang there suspended for a few seconds, still turning over and over in the air. Then it began to fall down, 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 smack. It hit the water with a colossal splash and sank like a stone. But a few seconds later up it came again, and this time it stayed floating serenely upon the surface of the water. Chapter 17. At this moment the scene inside the peach itself was one of indescribable chaos. James Henry Trotter was lying bruised and battered on the floor of the room amongst a tangled mess of centipede and earthworm and spider and ladybird and glowworm and old green grasshopper. In the whole history of the world, no travellers had ever had more terrible journey than these unfortunate creatures. It had started out well, with much laughing and shouting, and for the first few seconds, as the peach began to roll slowly forward, nobody had minded being tumbled about a little bit. And when it went bump, and the centipede had shouted, that was Aunt Sponge, and then bump again, and that was Aunt Spiker, there had been a tremendous burst of cheering all around. But as soon as the peach rolled out the garden and began to go down the steep hill, rushing and plunging and bouncing madly downward, then the whole thing became a nightmare. James found himself being flung up against the ceiling, then back onto the floor, then sideways against the wall, then back up onto the ceiling again, and up and down and back and forth and round, and at the same time all the other creatures were flying through the air in every direction, and so were the chairs and the sofa, not to mention the 42 boots belonging to the centipede. Everything and all of them were being rattled around like peas inside an enormous rattle that was being rattled by a mad giant who refused to stop. To make it worse, something went wrong with the glowworm's lighting system, and the room was in pitchy darkness. There were screams and yells and curses and cries of pain, and everything kept going round and round at once. And once James made a frantic grab at some thick bars sticking out from the wall, only to find that they were a couple of the centipede's legs. "Let go, you idiot!" shouted the centipede, kicking himself free, and James was promptly flung across the room into the old green grasshopper's horny lap. Twice he got tangled up in Miss Spider's legs, a horrid business, and towards the end the poor earthworm, who was cracking himself like a whip every time he flew through the air from one side of the room to the other, coiled himself around James's body in a panic and refused to unwind. Oh, it was a frantic and terrible trip. But now it was all over, and the room was suddenly very still and quiet. Everybody was beginning and slowly and painfully to disentangle himself from everybody else. Oops. "Let's have some light," shouted the centipede. "Yes," they cried, "light! Give us some light!" "I'm trying," answered the poor glowworm. "I'm doing my best. Please be patient." They all waited in silence. Then a faint greenish light began to glimmer out of the glowworm's tail, and this gradually became stronger and stronger until it was anyway enough to see by. "Some great journey," the centipede said, limping across the room. "I shall never be the same again," murmured the earthworm. "Nor I," the ladybird said. "It's taken years off my life." "But, my dear friends," cried the old green grasshopper, trying to be cheerful, We are there." "Where?" they asked. "Where is there?" "I don't know," the old green grasshopper said, "but I'll bet it's somewhere good." "We are probably at the bottom of a coal mine," the earthworm said gloomily. "We certainly went down and felt and down, very suddenly at the last moment. I felt it in my stomach. I still feel it." "Perhaps we are in the middle of a beautiful country full of songs and music," the old green grasshopper said. "Or near the seashore," said James eagerly, "with lots of other children down on the sand for me to play with." "Pardon," murmured the ladybird, turning a trifle pale, "but am I wrong in thinking that we seem to be bobbing up and down?" "Bobbing up and down!" they cried. "What on earth do you mean?" "You're still giddy from the journey," the old grasshopper told her. "You'll get over it in a minute. Is everybody ready to go upstairs now and take a look around?" "Yes, yes," they chorused. "Come on, let's go." "I refuse to show myself out of doors in my bare feet," the centipede said. "I have to get my boots on again first." "For heaven's sake, let's not go through all that nonsense again," the earthworm said. "Let's all lend the centipede a hand and get it over with," the ladybird said. "Come on." So they did, all except Miss Spider, who set about weaving a long rope ladder that would reach from the floor up to the hole in the ceiling. The old green grasshopper had wisely said that they must not risk going out of the side entrance when they didn't know where they were, but they must have first of all go up on top of the peach and have a look around. So half an hour later, when the rope ladder had been finished and hung, and 42nd boot had been laced neatly onto the centipede's 42nd foot, they were all ready to go out. Amidst mounting excitement and shouts of "Here we go, boys! The promised land! I can't wait to see it!" the whole company climbed up the ladder one by one and disappeared into a dark, soggy tunnel in the ceiling that went steeply, almost vertically upwards. Chapter 18. A minute later, they were out in the open, standing on the very top of the peach near the stem, blinking their eyes in the strong sunlight and peering nervously around. "What happened? Where are we? But this is impossible, unbelievable, terrible." "I told you we were bobbing up and down," the ladybird said. "We're in the middle of the sea," cried James. And indeed they were. A strong current and a high wind had carried the peach so quickly away from the shore that already the land was out of sight. All around them lay a vast black ocean, deep and hungry. Little waves were bibbing against the sides of the peach. "But how did it happen?" they cried. Where are the fields? Where are the woods? Where is England? Nobody, not even James, could understand how in the world a thing like this could have come about. Ladies and gentlemen, the old green grasshopper said, trying hard to keep the fear and disappointment out of his voice, I'm afraid that we find ourselves in a rather awkward situation. Awkward? Cried the earthworm. My dear old grasshopper, we are finished. Every one of us is about to perish. I may be blind, you know, but that much I can see quite clearly. Off with my boots, shouted the centipede. I cannot swim with all my boots on. I can't swim at all, cried the ladybird. Nor can I, wailed the glowworm. Nor I, said Miss Spider. None of us three girls can swim a single stroke. But you won't have to swim, said James calmly. We are floating beautifully, and sooner or later the ship is bound to come along and pick us up. They all stared at him in amazement. Are you quite sure that we are not sinking? The ladybird asked. Of course I'm sure, answered James. Go and look for yourself. They all ran over the side of the peach and peered down at the water below. The boy is quite right, the old green grasshopper said. We are floating beautifully. Now we must all sit down and keep perfectly calm. Everything will be all right in the end. What an absolute nonsense, cried the earthworm. Nothing is ever all right in the end, and well you know it. Poor earthworm, said the ladybird said, whispering in James' ear. He loves to make everything into a disaster. He hates to be happy. He is only happy when he is gloomy. Now, isn't that odd? But then, I suppose just being an earthworm is enough to make a person pretty gloomy. Don't you agree? If this peach is not going to sink, the earthworm was saying, and if we're not going to be drowned, then every one of us is going to starve to death instead. Do you realise that we haven't had a thing to eat since yesterday morning? By golly, he's right, cried the centipede. For once the earthworm is right. Of course I'm right, the earthworm said, and we're not likely to find anything around here either. We shall get thinner and thinner and thirstier, and we shall all die a slow and grisly death from starvation. I'm dying already, and I'm slowly shrivelling up for want of food. Personally, I would rather drown. But, good heavens, you must be blind, said James. You know very well I'm blind, snapped the earthworm. There's no need to rub it in. I didn't mean that, said James quickly. I'm sorry, but can't you see that? See, shouted the poor earthworm. How can I see if I'm blind? James took a deep, slow breath. Can you realise, he said patiently, that we have enough food here to last us for weeks and weeks? Where? They said. Where? Why, the peach, of course. Our whole ship is made of food. Jumping Jehoshaphat, they cried. We never thought of that. My dear James, said the old green grasshopper, laying a front leg affectionately on James' shoulder, I don't know what we'd do without you. You're so clever. Ladies and gentlemen, we are saved again. We are most certainly not, said the earthworm. You must be crazy. You can't eat the ship. It's the only thing that's keeping us up. We shall starve if we don't, said the centipede. And we shall drown if we do, cried the earthworm. Oh dear, said the green grasshopper. Now we're worse off than before. Couldn't we just eat a little bit of it? Asked Miss Spider. I'm so dreadfully hungry. You can eat all you want, James answered. It would take us weeks and weeks to make any sort of a dent in this enormous peach. Surely you can see that. Good heavens, he's right again, cried the old green grasshopper, clapping his hands. It would take weeks and weeks. Of course it would. But let's not go making a lot of holes all over the deck. I think we'd better simply scoop it out of that tunnel over there, the one we've just come up by. An excellent idea, said the ladybird. What are you looking so worried about, earthworm? The centipede asked. What's the problem? The problem is, the earthworm said. The problem is that there is no problem. Everyone burst out laughing. Cheer up, earthworm, he said. Come and eat. And they all went over to the tunnel entrance and began scooping out great chunks of juicy, golden-coloured peach flesh. Oh, marvellous, said the centipede, stuffing it into his mouth. Delicious, said the old green grasshopper. Just fabulous, said the glowworm. Oh my, said the ladybird primly. What a heavenly taste. She looked up at James and she smiled, and James smiled back at her. They sat down on the deck together, both of them chewing away happily. You know, James, the ladybird said, up until this moment I have never in my life tasted anything except those tiny green flies that live on rose bushes. They have perfectly delightful flavour, but this peach is even better. Isn't it glorious? Miss Spider said, coming over to join them. Personally, I had always thought that a big juicy caught in the web blue bottle was the finest dinner in the world until I tasted this. What a flavour, the centipede cried. It's terrific. There's nothing like it. There never has been. And I should know because I personally have tasted all the finest foods in the world. Whereupon the centipede, with his mouth full of peach and with juice running down all over his chin, suddenly burst into song. And I'm probably not going to sing this one, guys, I'll just say it. I'm very sorry. I've eaten many strange things and scrumptious dishes in my time, like jellied nuts and dangly brats and earworms cooked in slime. And nice with rice, they're really nice when roasted in their prime. But don't forget to sprinkle them with just a pinch of grime. I've eaten fresh mud burgers by the greatest cooks there are, and scrambled dregs and stink bug eggs and hornets stewed in tar, and pails of snails and lizards' tails and beetles by the jar. A beetle is improved by just a splash of vinegar. I open I often eat boiled slobbages. They're grand when served beside minced doodlebugs and curried slugs. And have you ever tried mosquitoes' toes and wampfish roes, most delicately fried? The only trouble is they disagree with my inside. I'm mad for crispy wasp things on piece of buttered toast, and pickled spines of porcupines, and then a gorgeous roast of dragon's flesh, and well hung, not fresh. It costs £1 at most, and comes to you in barrels if you order it by post. I crave the tasty tentacles of octopi for tea. I like hot dogs, I love hot frogs, and surely you'll agree. A plate of soil with engine oil's a super recipe. I hardly need to mention that it's practically free. For dinner on my birthday, shall I tell you what I chose? Hot noodles made from poodles on a slice of garden hose, and a rather smelly jelly made of armadillo's toes. The jelly is delicious, but you have to hold your nose. Now comes, the centipede declared, the burden of my speech. These foods are rare beyond compare, some are right out of reach. But there's no doubt I'd go without a million plates of each for one small mite, a tiny bite of this fantastic peach. Everybody was feeling happy now. The sun was shining brightly out of a soft blue sky, and the day was calm. The giant peach, with the sunlight glinting on its side, was like a massive golden ball sailing upon a silver sea. And that is where I'm going to stop there, guys. Slightly longer one today, not too much longer, but it is the weekend, so I thought I'd treat you to a bit of a longer read. The next chapter will be chapter 19. We have finished on chapter 67 if you're reading my copy of the book. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you're having a lovely weekend, and I hope you have a lovely upcoming week. I'm looking forward to doing more of these read-alongs as the week goes on. Thank you guys again, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye!